the demographic of different outlooks at different times. We weren't all the same. I was a pusher for what about this? And what about that? Give me a problem. I'll ask a lot of questions and try to do something with it. So my role there was to start to look at the bigger picture. How much land do we? Who has land in Madison? If we're gonna, because by the time I got hired, all the easy 80s were over. 88. Wow, game on. Look at all this land in Madison. It's a cool place. So a bunch of those, hey, you can use it for community gardens. They started going. So the question was, what's the big? How, we knew it was doing good. So how do we keep doing it? And why? We were doing it sort of as the Lone Ranger agency. We got these nice handshake deals from people. Yeah, why not? Definitely, you could use it, But once that person retires, what's the policy? There's no policy existing anywhere. So we analyzed how much land is there, who's got it, and one of them things we came up with was Parks Department is twice as big per area as almost any park department for any city in the country, and they were in a lot of the right places. And why weren't we working with them? So that led to a whole back and forth about, well, that's not recreation. And that's like the family saving activity. That's what poor people do. And they were used to having gardens as an interim use that would then turn over to the real use, which is basketball. And they had a cookie cutter approach at the time to what a park is. And we weren't one of the first things. And I said, our needs are like, okay, how many acres do we have? And how many acres should we have? And if you've got 6,000 acres and we're talking 40 max all over, that doesn't seem like a great big ask. But it was institutional culturally a big ask. So there had to be a lot of trust building and background stuff. But there also had to be, pressure. And we found out that in some cities you have a park and a rec department. It's one thing. Madison loved to split things up. So we had a park department. We just provide facilities. And then we have a rec department, which is MSCR, and we do programming, but it's usually pretty, you know. So there's a lot of work so how do you become an entity that serves? And that's why I had to look at, okay, I got a lot of women, these are women mainly, we have to scale for what they need, so there's just a lot of having to do a dive into what is actually, who are we and what's the problem and as a poor people's system, that's always going to be an issue. But other people, we were having, at your garden, we were actually having to turn people away as over income. Everybody who was above that federal poverty line, because of our agency, was specifically precluded from doing much with that. Talk about smart thinking. Anyway, we'd have to turn away people who had access to politics, who could pay for everything was subsidized. They could actually pay for what it cost, what it was worth, you know. And we just decided that we've got to break some of these boundaries. And my agency was always like, oh, we got to just serve the poor. And it was like, oh, the poor don't need, should we ghettoize the poor? I don't think so. I think you should, you know, it's all, they have things to offer as far as unique authenticness, family stuff. They're just, gardeners are delightful people to be around in the main. Um, and so, why are you denying people this? And so, a lot of people like your garden uh, kind of got it just on a visceral level and started being more of a presence in the whole thinking and actually trying to do more with resources and advocate for people who couldn't, linguistically or whatever, poor people are, they get rid of, sit around poverty, during Bill Clinton, and it's like, get a job or get out, and you only get it for so many years, and suddenly things were very changed for people, and they were all working these double low low wage jobs and keep your nose down and shut up. So that was working. So anyway, on were the days of maybe we should start a poor people's party, It actually was consideration in the late '60s. And anyway, so on and on the story goes. But Sheboygan was, Sheboygan, we used to name all the gardens after streets if we could, because we had people who weren't English first language. So it's easier for them to know where Sheboygan is if they go to Sheboygan Avenue. You give them a fancy name like, the back 40 or something over easy, it's just not going to get them there. That's why this is the place we're sitting is Green Gardens now, but it always has the word Rimrock in it, saying, because it has continuity with the past. So that's what, when we used to try to cite things on bus lines, because a lot of our people, weren't drivers, you had to go through all that. They're just getting naturalized. They're just figuring their way around the system. So, in fact, that's how one of the coordinators before me, we had a list of all of the gardens, and she'd been to all of them a couple times, but she couldn't find a Sheboygan garden because it was up on this rise, sort of hidden, and it wasn't obvious. You go to the Hill Farm State Office to Sheboygan, you walk around the lot, there's no garden here. But people keep calling. I'm from Sheboygan Garden. I need to. So finally, she's standing there, and somebody gets off the bus with a hose and a couple of bags and starts walking. And she said, "I'm going to follow that person." And she walks up the little hill, and there it was, out of sight. A wonderful. And it's one of those. What do they call it? Benign neglect. Something happens because everybody isn't bird dogging it all the time. Even the administrators in the DOA building, there's a line of trees screening you guys. So pretty much people could be people and not somebody thinking, why are they scratching their navel instead of whatever. There's people get upset about things I can't even begin to understand. But so, and there's also the nervousness about bureaucratic people have about everything has to be totally in order all the time. And I think your garden had somebody like that. And we had to pretty much address, since we were beggars, we didn't own the land, we had to sort of try and fit in a bunch of humans with another bunch of humans who didn't always. I mean, we had that at some churches too, where neatness was next to godliness or something, instead of, they do need sticks to put in the ground so they can grow some of this stuff up that grows upright. And people, I think the general population is pretty far removed from their farm roots. I mean, farmers markets are helping, and some of the CSAs are helping, trying to break down those barriers, and the school community gardens are starting to help. But I think there was a gap in there, and Madison was no worse than any place else, but those people were a couple of generations removed from actual land experience, so they didn't. And we had to kind of take these people who were very rural sometimes, and then say, hey, you're in the city now. You gotta, you put all the things in a neat pile over here. People appreciate it. It might be a little more work, but the land it's that or no land. So how are we going to play here? So we were and my job was to kind of gently say things that were, should have been obvious, but they're not. Everybody starts from a different place. So, and find out what people were really all about, and there's a lot there. So so your garden was always, geez, these guys they're in touch. They go to each other's meetings. Holy cow. We were a highly educated group in the main, like 80% of your people had email back when we were just, early on. So communication, you had a network. The other gardens, you had all those languages, but most people could still work through the English, or you had somebody who would call them, and your group was small enough. And I think your scale at one time was quite, everybody could see everybody who was there. That's before the expansion. Because the pressure was on. You always had, a space that you could never be there and not see who was at the other end. Where some of the larger gardens, that's more of an issue. You really have to work on developing a general sense rather than a visceral sense. And I think because you had that as a kernel, you were able to expand. Because all the good things started by that uh, everybody getting it, you know, and knowing people directly. So I think, you know, when I would get new gardens, I would say, let's start small, you know, and then let's do this. And part of that was experiencing your garden and seeing how it worked, because the model for community gardens, it's very different all around the country, and you know, you have to come up with something that works in your area, but the whole organizing piece, that should always be, everybody likes to picture flowers and do this, but to actually know how to turn things goes as a social institution, that's a different thing, you know. And I think, still think that we're underperforming is a nice way to say it. There's been some good investments, but they've been so basic, you know. And the gardens that have a little art space, like at the Troy Gardens, and your garden, does it have any social space right now? I mean, you got a park and you got a shelter nearby. That helps a lot, you know. Once gardens become places like where people do things besides garden, like have a wedding reception, a picnic, and the musicians come and play, and people, somebody brings a dance group out, or what is it, Gardening for Good group. It was originally working for people with disabilities, just the mainstream, and the next thing you know, the people are showing up because they want community. They don't, oh, you're organizing something? You need some help? I mean, it snowballed. It was not, and happily. I mean, we love happy snowballs. So there were a lot of things that, you know, your garden was very instrumental in. You know, some of your members of the original Save the Gardens group in the '90s. You know, after we tried reason and you know, having good articles in the local papers and stuff, but really people on the ground that actually call people and, you know, show up and ask real questions of people that get elected, that all helps. And so that you know, for me is part of the story of your garden and how your garden fit in, you know, to the rest of the picture. Some of my funders, two of my main funders, were always trying to two guys over into some other category that didn't exist. And I would have to go, please, they've got some poor people in there. Can you just spend money based on that for the poor people part of it? And which I think still, right now, not nobody, but not enough attention is paid to just that. And so I think the agency was a great agency. All this kind of stuff, but there were definitely some institutional problems that it couldn't get around. You could never do enough for poor people, and they felt like time for groups to go out on their own. I, you know, still think that some of them, they need some money to just target. I mean, what if we get a new wave from Afghanistan? Somalia, these things happen. They're very episodic. I worked with the people from Bhutan who were in refugee camps for 19 years down here on the south side. And it's the third wave of gardens of new people coming in the same place, but there's nothing. Here they come. You guys deal with them, right? And we do, but it's like it's not ever done as well as it might be. It's just sort of, oh my God, let's do this. And good people do show up. I mean, thank God, you know. But it's you know, I wouldn't want to run a railroad like this, as they used to say. Trains would not be on the track too long. You know, I mean, it'd be an off-road railroad. You know. So anyway.
I'm gonna stop.